Welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined as always... Wait, where'd he go? Where is he? I can't see him. Oh my god, my heat vision goggles. Is that an Invisidong? Oh, it is. Okay, and co-host...
Alex Dandino.
Yeah, you guys didn't know. 2020, we break into narrative bits. Acting sessions. All right, guys, welcome back. It is a new year. Same pod, though, for better or worse. So we're here.
Happy 2020.
Yeah, we're here. We're glad to be joining you guys. Thank you again. As you'll know, this first episode is a little late. I actually ended and started the new year with just gnarly stomach flu. So that was a fantastic way to kiss out the last decade, I felt. Perfect symbolic purging of my body, as my friend said. So yeah, guys, if you're here with us, please take a second, leave a rating and review, especially on Apple Podcast app. Share us on your social medias. Follow our social medias. And now you can find us on YouTube at The Nerd Alchemist. That's plural with an S at the end. So join in all the fun. But back to the show. As you guys know, in January, our theme this month, we are shaking bacon, man. So this month, all Kevin Bacon movies. Alex, let's do a brief intro to why Kevin Bacon. What is it about Kevin Bacon that we love so much?
You know, he has this iconic swagger, yet this iconic uptightness that sort of just makes for a perfect actor. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you. I think that's what makes Kevin Bacon so wonderful. I can't put my finger on the pulse of what makes Kevin Bacon tick, and that's why I watch Kevin Bacon movies. I don't know what else to say. It's
the weird, because I was thinking about this too with our list, right? So just look at the different roles that Kevin Bacon has done through his IMDb. You got, serial killer, scientists, like a lot of scientists and doctors, but also guys like trimmers, a lot of rednecks. He's kind of this ultra everyman. Right. Right? But he's beautiful, but in an approachable kind of different way. You know what I mean?
I'd also even look at the movies we left off this list, which is Diner is a good one. Diner's probably one of the more serious movies he's done. One of the more serious but that's acting the thing movies.
Though, it's range. He can do the serious role, be a normal leading man. He can do kitschy genre. He's very funny. He's super underrated as a comedic actor.
When we were trying to figure out what movies to do, I almost suggested A Few Good Men because I love him in that movie. I'm like, nah, he's in that movie for 15 minutes. But
that's the thing. But I fucking love him in that movie. He has a million of those. He's the best B actor, right? The second to the leading man guy. He's just a phenomenal actor. And again, go to his IMDb. It's in our running of most underrated IMDb pages. Just banger after banger. So we picked our 5, and it was really hard, right? So we're doing Hollow Man, which is today's episode. Trimmers, Footloose, Cop Car, and Flatliners. And you're every one of those is an absolute banger. We didn't even have time to get to Wild Things, The Messenger. There are a million great Kevin Bacon movies.
I also cannot wait to talk about Cop Car because it's one of those deeply underrated movies that no one saw.
Right. So, but this so that's
I hope you guys watch too.
Our brief spiel about why Kevin Bacon. He's a perfect film alchemist actor. We talked about. We just love everything this guy does. And this movie, Hollow Man, is one of my absolute favorite Kevin Bacon movies. It's kind of one of those movies we just forgot. 100%. But now there is this rise of Invisible People movies coming in the next year or so. Yeah. So I think this is a good time to get back to.
We'll see if it reaches the heights of this film, but
Yeah, and I love the Invisible Man premise to begin with.
Absolutely.
But Alex, walk me through specifically why you love Hollow Man so much.
Well, okay, so Hollow Man, I think, was one of the first rated R movies I was allowed to rent by myself. I went to Hollywood Video in Aurora, Ohio, rented this movie, and no one looked at me twice. I'm like, sweet. And I really wanted to watch it because I also love the Invisible Man premise. And I took it over to my friend's house and we were watching it. And then it gets to the end and I was like, oh my God, this is fucking bloody as hell. It was cool. But I think Hollow Man is this awesome time capsule of 1999 to 2000 living, which is Porsches, rap rock, and the need to insatiably murder everyone on your team.
A scientist who may win a Nobel Prize listening to whatever the fuck that was on the LA freeway. It's just in a classic scene that I love. I was like, choices were made in the editorial
It was
just mind blowing.
I mean, it's amazing. Like, again, this is like, and by the way, it's multiple times that Kevin Bacon is seen in his car singing along to the radio. I'm like, who needed to put out a record and just needed music in a movie?
Yeah.
Like, this is like, there's some next level stuff. And I was trying to figure out, like, because I know Kevin Bacon's been, I think Kevin Bacon is a musician as well.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, is this Kevin Bacon's band? He's trying to like push the Bacon label. I'm like,
Kevin
God,
Bacon's like, Corn with the K, Kevin with the K. This is perfect. We're getting on this new metal cresting wave.
Yeah, I mean, like, but again, like, also the way this movie is, and the way, like, it's Paul Verhoeven, who's I think our favorite director on this pod, possibly. We were
it's
talking
him
about
and
this before
John
the show.
Carpenter are in the running.
Yeah.
Like, those are the two guys that make the most perfect film Alchemist movies for us.
Like, we just absolutely gush about these guys every time we talk about one of their movies. And before the show, I was thinking about, like, how would you describe, like, a Paul Verhoeven movie? And I'm like, Paul Verhoeven movies are like an 1100 on the SATs. Like, you're just good enough, but not quite smart. Like, that's like, and that's what I got on the SATs. And that's, like, pretty much what that's what I aspire to be. Just smart enough, but kind of not. And that's kind of like how it works. Again, but I love this movie. Like, the beginning of this movie starts awesomely. Like, I think...
Yeah, so this movie, what it is, though, what's so good about this movie to me is it's a great high-concept premise. You have an amazing cast of actors. Like, even every small role is just filled perfectly.
It's hardcore ensemble.
And they're all used as well as they can be.
Right.
But what I really like about this movie is it's the classic horror movie element of you don't want to call this movie wish fulfillment because we all would wish that we would not behave this way.
Right.
So what it is this movie to me plays is closer to Wishmaster, right? Where this is
yeah, good call.
This is the kind of movie where be careful what you wish for. And I think Kevin Bacon, as playing Sebastian Cain, they do a really good job of setting up this kind of premise that a lot of us humans face. He's just further down the line, which is when is enough enough?
Right.
And it's so they set up Sebastian Cain's emotional arc essentially as he's so full of himself and thinks he's so spectacular. He needs to actually stop seeing himself to be fulfilled. He has to become the actual invisible hand of God.
I mean, it's the line in the movie. It's like, it's amazing what you can do when you don't have to look at yourself in the morning. I'm like,
but that's a great, What can you do if you don't have to look at yourself in the mirror any longer is a great movie premise. Like, if you just pitched me that, like, my buddy was over here the other day and he's like, what are you watching? I was like, Maniac Cop. And he's like, cool, I don't even have to watch that. I know for a fact I would like it.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, like, imagine being an executive and someone walked in and said Maniac Cop. You're like, yeah, there's 10 different versions of that movie that I would probably like every one of them, right?
Right.
And that's the same what would you do if you didn't have to look at yourself anymore? It's brilliant. It's an actual brilliant conceit. So that's what I love is it's this good concept with this great, cast of characters. And then, you just, it's the movie that takes us to what would you do and then forces us to confront almost every fantasy that comes with being invisible is bad.
By the way, like, right off the bat too, like, I think that's the probably more interesting part is almost immediately when Kevin Bacon becomes invisible in this movie, he starts doing fucked up things. Like, it doesn't, like, it's not like it's one of those things where you're just like, oh, he's invisible. He's like learning how it's like, no, he immediately starts doing terrible things right from the jump.
Well,
like,
they set him up pretty early, right? And this is what I think the movie does exceptionally well and separates from a lot of movies of this ilk is the groundwork they lay is really good. So he's this super genius, but he's kind of lonely and feels underappreciated still. Right? The looking across the street and has this voyeur moment with the lady across the street, kind of pining for her.
Right.
And then we get in and you see this kind of combative, yet he wants to be lorded and worshipped by the people he works with.
Right.
And also doesn't mind throwing a little smackdown on them. The way he kind of looks at them almost is equal to the lab animals. They do a lot of good work setting him up early.
Yeah.
Which I think makes it work when he turns. Because that was one of the things I kept reading in people's comments is, like, oh man, why wouldn't he have just kept working? He would have found the cure. He already found it once.
It's not the point.
Well, also, yeah, right. They build in this subtext too of the chemical might be making him crazy. Right. But I don't even buy that, right? I don't think these animals in him are going crazy because the compound. Again, it's imagine, because they never quite say what happens to the body. We know the physical meat's there, but they say it's quantum shifting, whatever the fuck this means.
Quantum phase shift.
But just imagine that. And so what it is as their body disappears, it's as if they are unshackled from limitations. It is, but that's what I mean. They do a great job of setting it up so that when they launch into the games, I didn't find it to be this, oh, this is impossible. Come on, he's such a good guy.
Yeah, no. I think his actions are based on who, by the way, he has one of the great villain names, Sebastian Cain.
Yeah.
Great villain name. It's basically like an X-Men villain name.
European first crime. Perfect.
But yeah, that is the best part about it is there's nothing shocking about any of his actions moving throughout the movie because it starts when they're trying to bring the gorilla back into visibility. Joey Slotnick, who by the way is one of my all-time favorite underrated character actors.
Right.
So whenever he shows up in a movie, it's great. He's like the lab tech who's this is God, what you're doing is wrong. Right. And then, he has I'm God. That whole thing. I think from that beat on, exactly who Kevin Bacon is. Sebastian Cain, sorry, not Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon's a great man. Sebastian Cain, the murdering molecular biologist, that's Sebastian Cain right there. Hey, I told you, you're not God. I am. That is I'm there you go. That's all you need to know. He could not speak for the rest of the movie, and you would absolutely have every justification for knowing what it is that happens throughout the movie.
Right, but also in that moment, they do an important turn too, which is he's not actually happy in that moment.
No, so he's unsatisfied.
And he's still out there. He's like, well, this is it. I guess I'll be on to my next great genius thing. I'll win all the awards and accolades and go down in history. Maybe as the man who ruins the world, right? This has a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids vibe where you're this is Oppenheimer-ish. Terrible things happen from this.
Right.
But he's not satisfied. And then to cut directly to the meeting where instead of gloating and taking his victory lap with the Senate committee and, the snarky professor who obviously they've hated each other for a long time.
Right.
He takes an L, right? He sits there and he's like, oh, we're not done yet. Lets that guy fucking berate him. Only to be like, oh, now I'm going to do it because I'll be the first.
It's pretty cool, man.
It's this great moment where even in the face of this, because that whole gorilla scene is pretty wild, too. It's a really fun. That's the other thing this movie does exceptionally well is invisible gags. They really thought through to the maximum extent of what is the fun you can do with an invisible character.
Yeah.
They thought of them all. But that turn of him not being able to be happy because it's not enough that he'll be remembered as the guy who made the breakthrough. He has to be the guy that will then be interviewed. What was it like to be invisible? Right. And that's it. That's a really important turn for this guy and sets up the horror show that we're about to witness.
Right. What's the line? And that's another great, that's another great line he has, which was you don't make history by following the rules.
Right.
That's perfect. That's exactly what you should be doing if you're Sebastian Cain, the molecular biologist who doesn't give a shit about anybody else on your team. Every single thing in the beginning of this movie, between saying he's God, arguing with the veterinarian constantly, that woman who's on Fear the Walking Dead. By the way, another great actress who I absolutely love in this movie. Arguing with her constantly about the state of affairs with these animals. She is nonstop hey, you're abusing these animals. She's fuck you, hippie. And just keeps walking all the time.
The best part of that is with the vet, though? She starts off with this really kind of serious, we have to take care of these animals, right? Next thing you know, when we're in the Pentagon meeting, we see in the tape that there are
God.
How many dead gorillas? We can just assume a lot of corpses. So it feels like a weird to be this Monday I'm throwing down the indignation flag.
Not just corpses. Oh wait, yeah, that's the best. So let's imagine in the context of this movie, we're showing up the day she was getting ready. She's today's the day. I'm going to walk right up to him and be like, you can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, she had dealt with 10 dead gorillas. She's not going to do 11. God damn it.
Absolutely. That underground base has a forklift in it to move gorilla corpses. Like, you
Not
could
just
sit
gorilla
down
corpses,
in your
but,
chair
like,
and be like, what's that smell? Oh, it's invisible rotting gorilla corpse all over that office.
Not just gorilla corpses, like liquefied gorilla corpses that are
Yeah.
like slowly decaying. Like that is truly like, again, and I'm not sure if that was, that looked like great like creature effects. Cause that was the part that always scared the shit out of me when I was a kid.
Well, it's early computer animation for a lot of the invisible change. And then by the time they get to the cell, they have that, what feels like 2 6-year-old children and like a conjoined gorilla suit.
Okay, but that actually, it's interesting you bring that up. I was reading some facts that literally is a man in a gorilla suit.
Yeah, in the cage for sure.
Yeah, that's like probably one of my favorite little like bits from this, and I think they do a good job because they never show him like when the first time you see him, you only see him in the heat vision goggles, and I'm like, well, I can't really. Oh, that's definitely a guy in a gorilla suit. Like, it's just like it's.
They didn't try to get an Andy Serkis level performance out of it.
Again, man, it's Paul Verhoeven. Like Paul Verhoeven, I love that Paul Verhoeven's like, I'm gonna do the least amount of CGI I have to, but I definitely have to CGI Kevin Bacon and his dick and balls quantum phase shifting.
Oh yeah,
like
you gotta have that.
Like, by the way, the second lead in this movie is definitely Kevin Bacon's penis because we see that thing numerous times.
Yeah,
and
I like too how they had to do, because that was my first question. I was like, who was animating that dick? Like, there has to be a clause in the contract, right? Like, determining how the dick looks invisible. And because that's why I was like, this isn't necessarily like they didn't go full Marky Mark where they put like a prosthetic on it for like a Diggler effect.
Right.
But it's a hardy enough dong. Like, it's a solid enough work.
It's a solid sixer.
Yeah,
you know?
and I was trying to think. I couldn't remember off the top of my head, and God forbid I Google it. I should have. But I was like, have I seen Kevin Bacon's dick? I feel like I have.
Yeah, you don't want that coming up in your government searches, you know?
Yeah, I mean, God forbid. I'm probably already on every list. But
Kevin Bacon's penis.
But yeah, I mean, they are clever in how they do it, right? They're trying to take because this lab essentially is like a cheap motel room, but instead of sperm, it's liquefied gorilla. So they're like, how do we pull you out of the horror of that so you can still enjoy yourself? And it's like, even when he's getting morphed or whatnot, right? He's getting divisibled. He fucking convulsively he goes, ah! And it's just one hip thrust. Just so they can throw the sheets, and he's doing like a yoga arch just to put that buttocks right in the center.
It's perfectly framed butt.
But that's the brilliant thing, right? Kevin Bacon has been used for the butt a lot, right? Like a lot of movies have done this trick. Why wouldn't you? If you got the goods, you got to use it. You pay to play.
He apparently
this is
has
the one movie where it's a clever idea or challenge for a movie too, or not a clever, but it's an interesting challenge for a movie to say we're paying for this bankable, charismatic leading man. Let's erase him from the movie. And let's just get some voiceover out of this guy. How do you solve that? When you get your shot, you definitely swing for the butt and dong fences.
Right. You know, that was another thing I was reading is they actually thought Kevin Bacon wasn't going to need to be on set. So he
for the
took
whole
the role.
Movie?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the crazy thing. Like, this is the nutty thing. They didn't think it was going to need to be him. And again, this goes back to why we're doing this month at all. Like, what's shaking bacon? It's Kevin Bacon. They didn't think he was going to need to be on set, so that's why he took the role, because he literally had to be there for like a week. So he took the job, and then Paul Verhoeven got through like a week of filming with like other body doubles, and the actors weren't reacting properly. And he was like, "We got to get Kevin Bacon." So he had to like renegotiate his fee and everything. Like. That, by the way, is the power of Kevin Bacon. Like, Kevin Bacon is such a great actor and so awesome at his job that they tried to replace him thinking, oh, he can just do his, like, creepy voiceover. Didn't work. You gotta have Bacon on set. Like, that's the most important part.
Is reacting.
Exactly.
You gotta have the bakes, dude. No, it's that's so weird. Like, imagine a version of this movie where it's like, because I could just hear, like, the creative meeting now, right? It's like, even when he's visible, he's invisible. Like, we still can't see his face ever.
If you go on the IMDb page, they have the theatrical release poster as the picture. Or sorry, it's the Wikipedia page. And the tagline for the movie, like, you could think about a lot of different taglines for the movie, I think. Like, you could probably go with, like, oh, what would you do if you didn't have to look at yourself in the mirror in the morning? Like, that's, it's long, but it's an okay tagline. Something snappy like that. The actual tagline is, think you're alone? Think again. Like,
great.
Like,
good.
That.
Nailed it.
That 1000%, by the way, takes, like, the piss out of any science fiction and goes straight to, like, creeper, horror, single white female status of this movie. Because after he becomes the Hollow Man, like, once he starts, like,
Alex,
unraveling
wasn't he always a Hollow Man?
Ooh, wow, we're really getting into it.
Can
here.
you ever see what's in the heart of man? See, look, I got so many. That was just in like 15 seconds.
Yeah, see, like, anything else besides think you're alone, think again.
Yeah.
But that actually speaks to, like, the second half of the movie. Like, we get through, like, it's interesting. Like, we spend, like, the first half of the movie talking about the science and getting very sciencey and so on and so forth. And, like,
we, or are they just playing circle Tetris and screaming? Oh, gosh, my circle Tetris blew up again. That's the science of this movie. They all somehow have this program with circle Tetris. And I was like, there's only like 4 places to add circles. But yeah, Josh Brolin constantly is like, befuddled again. Where's my B's and C's?
That's that's my favorite. Like, I can't remember what part of Josh Brolin's his career was. What state his career was in at that point? Because I feel like Josh Brolin was the third lead in this movie because he had to take a back seat. He had some. Yeah, I feel like this was a time where no one really knew who Josh Brolin was. It was that phase of his career where he wasn't like Josh Brolin again.
Well,
he
because
was just like,
again,
Josh Brolin.
He looks like the made-for-TV movie version of Kevin Bacon in this phase, where he's got that kind of everyman but rugged, right? He's playing a scientist again or doctor, so it's like he can kind of slot into these things. But again, he's just more butch. He's butch enough that you can't see him as an everyman, right?
Right.
Like if Tom Hanks had Josh Brolin's body, he wouldn't have ended up being Tom Hanks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's kind of I don't want to say the porno movie version of Kevin Bacon, but that's what he looks like at this phase. He's obviously gone on to have this great acting career, very Bacon-esque in his trajectory. But I think Kevin Bacon is the prime version of what Josh Brolin's trying to be at this phase.
Right. And this also, the second lead in this movie is Elizabeth Shue, who I think this might have been the last movie I remember from this phase of her career seeing her in.
Yeah.
Like,
she just kind of went after this.
She kind of just like walked away, and I'm not really sure what happened. But either way, it's so much fun to see her in this movie because, again, she's wonderful. And she's always been like one of those actresses who I like to watch show up, but this movie particularly because it seems like it's kind of outside her wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Like I don't remember seeing her in any other horror movies.
She has a really weird. They do this weird.
This feels like it's supposed to be a different actress, to be honest with you.
It's weird because her movie her role in this movie seems to bring home the kind like watching this now in today's era, right? There is an inevitable. This is a Me Too horror story, right? It's inevitable, this invisible hand of powerful men and what they're able to do to subordinates.
Right.
And they keep playing her off as, I better go run to Sebastian and have an overly sultry heart-to-heart, at which I'll kind of shut him down at the end.
Right.
And I was like, that's not exactly the best look nowadays, right? Is that,
can you
they're
imagine?
Like, we used to date and he was the worst guy, but now I'm still kind of like, I'm going to let him get close enough to kiss me, even though I'm with Josh Brolin. It's a weird kind of character role that feels lost in that era.
Can you just imagine, like, this movie, like, watching this now in the context of 2020 is pretty fascinating because I feel like 2 years after this movie was made, they probably would have said, like, I can't believe you're even in here pitching this. Even in 2002, I feel like they'd be like, there's no way this movie's going to get made.
Oh, you could have done this movie for sure.
I don't know, dude. There is, like, it is pretty shocking.
right,
pretty
but not long, like the early 2000s when we started to get into like Hostel and shit. Like if this movie came out
That's
in the
true.
early 2000s,
I guess
it would
this
have
is
been
sort
an
of
absolute horseshit.
this is sort of a precursor to torture porn a little bit, because it is like, I mean, it is super violent against women. Like,
but that's what I mean though. The torture is, and this is this was the part of the movie I had somewhat forgotten. Is we get a lot of this creeper cam, right, where it's Kevin Bacon invisible cam. And it reminded me of the line where it's like, oh, your eyes are taking in more than you want because your eyelids are transparent.
right.
That's how I felt as an audience member, right? You're just watching this guy like, oh my God. When he goes in the first, I mean, he's been invisible for, let's say, 2 days.
Right.
36 of those, he was passed out. 4 hours of testing. And he's like, oh, that was a rough 4 hours. I better go grope my enemy, my in-base enemy, to make her feel less
I better go
than.
grope the veterinarian, who, by the way, is not wearing a bra and a very small sweater. I'm like, this is so, like, this
Again,
is the
that feels very 90s, that it was still okay to
Hardcore.
use these kind of roles, right? Like, these are
100%.
scientists. These
Yeah.
are scientist women.
This is a respected scientist.
Yeah, we're just like, we'll still, like, Elizabeth Shue still feels like she has to, like, put out the vibe with Kevin Bacon. Like, she's a molecular scientist. What the fuck? She doesn't have to put out the vibe to her ex. You know, same with this veterinarian who's like, God damn it, I just finished squeegeeing the 85th gorilla off the wall. Now I got to get my tits grabbed. And then this is the crazy thing, though. The fact that she just wouldn't, she has no course of repercussion against him. That's the part that becomes scary with her character, is he keeps lording it over her. Because she sees him go back to bed.
Right.
And also, this is kind of the funny part about Kevin Bacon's ruse, this initial ruse, right? He's this genius. But you're like, do you really assume there's another invisible rapist? Like, who else could be the invisible rapist in this base, even if you pull off your I'm laying in bed trick?
Well, again, who else? She didn't unbutton her own shirt. Like, it's just a whole thing. I'm like, obviously he did it. Like, there's really no other way around it.
Yeah.
Like,
But
and
that's
again,
the thing. That's what becomes, because it is that question. You're like, how could he think this would happen and he'd get away with it? I don't think he wants to get away with it, right? Like, but this is where we start to see a shift where now he's into the power of it.
Right.
Now all the things before that stood in his way and he couldn't have any control over, this is kind of the Invisible Man take of this movie, which is now he can. Even a man as successful and powerful as him has limitations. Now he can justify these as he sees fit. Oh, the vet's going to say no to me? I'm going to grope her and harass her.
Right.
And let her know she's not safe here. You know what I mean? Oh, Elizabeth Shue's going to be with some other lesser man? I'll just go spy on her in her apartment and break her windows and shit.
Right.
So this is where it gets really... I mean, the scariest scene in the movie is obviously the girl across the street.
Yeah, which apparently was totally cut down. The scene, I mean, so everything about the scene implies that he sexually assaults her, like, hardcore.
Oh, he attacks her and she falls on the bed, and that's what we see.
Right.
And even the line before, his exact line is, who's gonna know?
Right.
What would we not know? The rape.
Everything, right. And, like, apparently they shot the whole scene and they were like, yeah, you're not going to put that in a movie. So,
you told me that, and it blew my... I mean, part of me, I guess, suspected that, yeah, but why? What would be... This is kind of the weird part of a lot of this movie. There's some side boob and sexual, matter. But, like, when he's undressing the vet and we see boobs... This was like one of the first times I remember as a teen boy not being like, boobs! Like every time you saw boobs, it was like the 4th of July, right? At that age. Especially when we grew up where you didn't have just like phones and the internet where you could find all the boobs.
Oh, yeah.
So, but this was one of the first ones I remember being like, but ill-gotten boobs. Not ideal.
Not unearned boobs.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's cringy. And so then to be like, that the girl in that apartment is obviously gorgeous and wildly attractive. Yes, but would you want to see her bouncing around naked knowing that it was a violent rape?
Yeah, see, that's
like, who is that scene for? Why would you even waste the money to film that?
Yeah, I don't understand why that...
strange.
Like, I think from a narrative perspective, it's like everything that we saw in the movie made the most sense. I think filming it all together is a bizarre exercise, and thinking it needs to be in the movie narratively doesn't make any sense.
No, it feels like this actress will add male eyeballs because she's beautiful.
Right.
But gross.
I mean, honestly, I got all the information I needed from him, from the POV cam, from her disrobing. Like, I don't need any other information besides her screaming. Like, I get it.
And that's why the couple of boobs I see, I think you can defend, and it shows vulnerability. Because we know, this is titillation, but we also mark it with this feels bad because of the way he's behaving, right? And once you start going beyond that, the fact that they would even think that could make it into the movie is just ridiculous. Because you get the narrative fear of just, she's in her apartment, in her robe, like as vulnerable as she can be. And he's in there messing with her. Like when he starts doing, because that's the thing he starts doing, like moving Elizabeth Shue's Coca-Cola, moving the mirror. Those are wildly scary moments that just kind of get passed off because the, gags get bigger and bigger. But imagine being in your home and someone kept moving your coffee cup and you know who it is, but you still can't see them or do anything about it.
Right.
That's fucking terrifying.
It's terrifying.
And it is the premise of the movie, which is just imagine that the world unseen holds someone predatory. What the movie actually does, right, is so Kevin Bacon becomes a miniature version of God in this. Yeah. It becomes scary. Like, imagine religion in the eyes of Hollow Man, that there's just some invisible guy who can fucking do whatever he wants to you. Hovering over your shoulder, that's fucking scary.
Yeah, but, like, see, it's Kevin Bacon. If it was, like, a big, sweaty guy, like, you could always catch that guy. Like, eventually.
Like, James Gandolfini could not have done this role. He's there. He's right there.
R.I.P. Yeah. R.I.P.
He's right there in the corner. I can hear him. His varsity level athleticism has failed him. I hear him in the corner.
Like, that's like absolutely like, yeah, like, but that's.
Well, imagine a version of Hollow Man where instead of Kevin Bacon, right, it's genre Kevin Bacon, which would be Lance Hendrickson.
Right.
Right. There is a game too. Instead of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, it's which actors are filling a niche version of Kevin Bacon, right? And Lance Hendrickson's like the scary, everything went wrong Kevin Bacon.
Right.
And so imagine a version of this movie where Lance Hendrickson breathes like Gandolfini. This would have to be an X-rated film. It would be so terrifying.
Did you know this is also the first Paul Verhoeven movie that went to the MPA and did not immediately get an NC-17 rating? First time he ever sent a movie in. Like, every other movie he sends in gets an NC-17 rating immediately.
Well, RoboCop, obviously. Event Horizon has blood orgies.
RoboCop, Event Horizon, Total Recall, Basic Instinct, Showgirls, and Starship Troopers all got an X or NC-17 rating and then got recut for an R rating. This is the first time he got an R rating on the first submission.
With probably the creepiest movie he ever made.
Which also, he regrets making it. He didn't like it at all, apparently. Which is a real shame.
It's so weird too, because I think it's wildly underappreciated for how scary it is.
Well, I think so too.
And in the Invisible Man movie that's coming out soon with Elizabeth Moss, which hopefully we'll cover, you see that this is kind of the angle they're taking now.
Right.
In the first Invisible Man stories that I remember reading and seeing, right, the Universal one, it's kind of this, look what I accidentally broke through, right? It's like an accidental scientific breakthrough. Right. And trying to deal with that. And more of what that guy's doing is self-preservation. I have to fix this. People are getting too close, so I will use this to commit a crime of, murder, covering up, whatnot.
Right. As
we've gotten further and further, I think that the more obvious pairing with this, power and ability is the invasion of intimacy.
Yeah.
And so I think Paul Verhoeven made this perfect Invisible Man movie.
Right.
And it's so sad to me that he hates it.
Well, I mean, I feel like, it's interesting because I read the quote. It's like in 2013 he got interviewed. He's like, he was saying that it was like the last time he made a movie. I'll quote it actually. He said, "I decided after Hollow Man, this is the first movie that I made that I thought I should not have made. It made money and this and that, but it really is not me anymore. I think many other people could have done it." Like, that's the thing that I think for him, he's like, he felt that this movie was not intrinsically Paul Verhoeven. But I would actually disagree. Like, I don't think in another director's bag of tricks, this movie is as interesting, to be honest with you. Like,
I mean, I'm sure he brought a lot to it, but you do understand I understand that mindset, really.
I understand his point of view. I think that he's
I mean, I can't believe Showgirls isn't the one where he's like, ugh, woof. Right?
Right. Well, that goes without saying. But I
mean, it would be a shame if we didn't get the worst sex scene of all time. But, like, that's the one I would pone it on.
But I also think that this movie, without Paul Verhoeven's tastes and his abilities as a director, if this was in, let's say, a different like and late 90s, early 2000s, like there are a lot of directors who just like got jobs a lot of the time, like got these bigger movies.
Yeah.
I think that like, now we are a little more precious with our directors. Like I think about particularly like you think about the Marvel movies, but I remember when the first Fantastic Four movie came out, the director was Tim Story, who's gone on and done other things, but like Tim Story, I didn't know who that was. Right. Paul Verhoeven's a name though, like so. Verhoeven puts
now
his stamp
we're in an
on
era where guys like Paul Verhoeven would be going to A24 and making smaller, more focused versions of their movies.
Of course, like
that's the road for a guy like him,
right? And I'm interested to see this new Invisible Man movie or woman. I'm not really sure what.
It's Invisible Man. Elizabeth Moss is attacked by like a bad domestic abuser. Cool. Yeah.
So like I think that, and like that's I think. The core of what Paul Verhoeven was trying to get at was the invasion of privacy and the loss of not just innocence, but the loss of the ability to be private inward and outward. Like if you're invisible, you can, yes, be seen right through and you can sneak around and do all these other things. But I also think there's a hint of the movie that is all of Sebastian Cain's personal life is like kind of on display, and his like he has to vomit in front of these people all the time. Like that's what tips him over the edge is he's no longer in charge. He's the experiment. I think that's like the part that really pisses him off. And that's why he like leaves the first time. And that's why he ends up doing the things he does is because of all the things he's in control of in the world. Finally, the one thing that he could control and he had control over, he no longer controls himself. It's pretty interesting.
Well, it's weird. Now he is the center of everyone's attention. Absolutely.
All right.
And that's not what he wants anymore because he doesn't have the power anymore.
Right, exactly.
He is no longer lording it over that. So it's weird. But this again goes back to the Wishmaster thing. He gets what he wants, but it has this dark extra layer to it.
Right. Well,
and I think that's fascinating, man. And
oh, totally.
I mean, I get where Paul Verhoeven's coming from. This movie stops being interesting with about 10 to 15 minutes to go.
Right.
Where now we're just kind of like climbing an elevator shaft. Like that whole sequence is horrendously boring. Compared to what we have seen, right? This is actually a pretty interesting think piece on power dynamics and the invasion of privacy and the horror of this experiment. End it on like a, poor Sylvester Stallone scene in an elevator is a bummer. I get what he's saying, but I think all the stuff before that is great. Here's a question I had for you. Is Sebastian Cain the worst piece of shit character ever in a movie?
Ooh. I'm trying to think if there's a worse piece of shit character in a movie.
I mean, you could make some other arguments like Henry. I'm talking about a guy who started normal, right? So not like Henry the serial killer.
Okay,
like
so you're
actual
saying
guys who started out as a normal, non-criminal member of society, who by the end of the movie has committed multiple rapes, tons of murders.
So you're not talking
this was
born
the scene
bad,
where I was
correct?
like, this is where Sebastian Cain became the worst guy. When he fucking beats that dog into a pulp in the cage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they showed the impact. They didn't show him grabbing, right? They gave you the splatter shot. I mean, he is like, I don't know if I can think of a harsher descent right off the top of my head.
No, I mean like that's the end of it right there.
Because you see movies like this, but it's normally someone I love was killed and I'm getting revenge.
That's 1,000% the.
That's more understandable, issue. Right? But this guy goes to full worst criminal I can think of.
Yeah.
In Act 2, like just Act 2, he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do all this shit." It's insane.
Well, no, I mean that's.
He commits a violent rape. What? 6 murders?
That's the end of the. I mean, no,
and
like, you don't even have to go further. Like he could have done nothing else in the movie, but he totally killed that dog, and that means he's a bad guy. Because, like, again, the dog's an innocent. The dog is an innocent, and also the dog didn't go crazy. So Kevin Bacon had
he might have. He might have.
But Sebastian Cain had it in himself the entire time. Like, that's what I think is the most important part about that scene itself. Is like, it shows the difference between you see two invisible beings. One, like, you know, when he grabbed the dog, you hear the dog like, you know, oh, like it's being pet, and then he takes it out and, you know, does it.
Yeah.
That I think is like that's the tip. That's not even a tipping point. Like, that's the end of it. Like, Sebastian Cain is definitely the biggest piece of shit in movies because he didn't start bad. He started, you know, the road to hell's paved with good intentions. Like, all right, so you're given a task of like making people invisible for what? Well, military installation.
Already probably not a good guy right away.
Right. Probably not a great guy, probably a little too cocksure of himself. And then you give him
he's just doing science that guaranteed is going to bring only misery to our world.
Absolutely.
But just doesn't care.
But in like his purview, he's still just doing science. Like, that I think is probably like the worst part, is like science for science sake is how Sebastian Cain starts this movie. And then it's science for his sake almost immediately.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, oh, wow, he's a huge piece of shit. He definitely is going to, like, this is definitely going to be a problem child guy.
Well, and, what's cool, again, even the dog, though, they set it up early where he's kind of talking about the gorilla, right? Like, I'd rather cut him up today. It saves time. So every sin he commits later, you see a seed of it before. And what the movie does really well is it uses the hollowness, right? It takes away these layers of disguise. Right? Because there are these moments where Kevin Bacon's still trying to fit in, right? Still thinks he can be a normal-ish guy, boss, coworker. And he puts on this, you know, shapeless mask in a way.
Right.
Detailless, flat mask. And what's fun is that that's what he was the whole time. He was that mask and the glasses. Just like it has extra layers of detail for disguise. But that was his true form.
Right.
And so the symbolism of him taking that off and his worst instincts being laid bare, that's the kind of stuff that I think this movie doesn't get a lot of credit for.
Right.
And it's just kind of labeled as this genre schlocky thing.
To that point, too, at the end when he's like sets the bomb and is trying to get out of there, when he's like drawing a face onto his like mask, like I would say like even more so that completes the metaphor, is like he knows what people are supposed to be like, so he tries to pretend to be that. Like that in and of itself is what makes Sebastian Cain like the most despicable villain we've ever seen in movies, but also like one of the more compelling villains because he's sort of like he's trying to be human the entire time, but failing so miserably at it that eventually once he takes the mask off, he's his true self. That's like the crazy thing is like Sebastian Cain's true self is the Invisible Man. He's been hiding that the entire time.
The God form, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really I don't know. This is like one of those movies where, yes, like you can get kind of bogged down in the slasher filmness of it all. And, you know, like, again, I actually really enjoy that part. And I agree. The last 10 minutes of this movie are pretty lame. And
once they hit the elevator, it's so boring. It's just a terrible scene. I'll give you that. And then it just ends with like an immediate, like, to the ambulance. And you're like, all right, that's fine. But the actual hunting of the team, I thought was pretty cool because they did add some really good invisible gags, right? So you got your heat vision goggles.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the camera that senses him so he can trick that.
Mm-hmm. The
fire extinguisher. They missed on the blood. If you're going to throw blood, don't throw it on the floor. Throw it in the air. Because it'll end up on the floor anyways, dummy. Absolutely. But that's a good one. Right? The sprinkler system, brilliant. The pool and the cigar smoke, brilliant.
Loved that scene.
So they have these really fantastic visual gags that play with the concept while doing kind of, we have to just eliminate body scenes.
Right.
I thought they did a really good job with that stuff. I liked that part of it a lot. They had the classic tracker. He's on the motion tracker.
Right. I also love like when Kevin Bacon becomes the Invisible Man, this almost inhuman strength he gets. Like, the thing I think about the most is the scene where he's choking Greg Grunberg. And like
a big
he
man.
Literally has Greg Grunberg lifted off the ground choking him. I'm like, there's no way in real life Kevin Bacon could do this. But
especially they told us specifically he's 160 pounds.
Yeah. So
That's like one Greg Grunberg tummy. Like his tummy section, right, weighs as much as Kevin Bacon.
And Kevin Bacon is lifting him off the ground, showing which again is another.
By the way, laying
gag.
on pipes, so it's just all arms.
Yeah,
all arm power. You can't even get his legs and that glorious bacon butt into it.
He's just.
Let me curl this fat porno looking at work guy up to me.
It's all it's all lats,
Yeah.
He's just,
maybe Brolin, I would believe it. Maybe Brolin.
But it was so. I mean, I also that visual gag. Also, I never thought about what people look like when they're being choked, and then when you kind of like see like his skin being mushed. I remember seeing that as a kid and be like, "Oh my god!" Like that is totally what people look like when they're getting choked.
Yeah.
And then of course, like he falls and busts his face on the pipe, which is pretty disgusting.
Yeah, he gashes his neck up. It's just, but that's what I mean. The movie's loaded with great moments like that, right? Like one of the scenes I love that's underrated is when the lab tech wants to go to the bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
And it's such a fun scene 'cause it's like, just imagine that her first thought is, oh, my boss is definitely in here wanting to watch me make toilet. That's scary. That shows you the level of terror and paranoia that already exists.
Right.
And that's just a small visual scene that tells you a lot of extra information about this world and movie. Well, I don't know. To wrap this up, I just think it's a great concept that had been done multiple times, and they found this really fun new riff that really gets to the terror of what is inside of us when you take off our flesh mask, right? It's a classic storytelling trope of the human face with all its expressiveness and emotion. The way we dress ourselves, this and that, changes us in a way that we're all this performative art piece, right? Take that away, and what the fuck is really inside of you? What is stopping you? Very much like we said in The Lighthouse, right? Take away protections, societal protections and norms that have been in place your whole life.
Right.
And there's nothing left to stop you from behaving exactly as you want. Right? That's what this movie gets to. And the terror of watching these women, and then eventually even the men, right? Theirs is more physical. But the psychological terror of these women, right? The lab tech with her mean boss groping her and still staying at work, letting her know that they both know what happened.
Right.
The neighbor just being accosted, right? The single white woman, in her flat or whatever, single woman in New York. Right. And then Elizabeth Shue, this constant fear of the ex-boyfriend, the overly, needy, clingy ex-boyfriend constantly trying to kiss her, now invisible and can chase her down everywhere.
Right.
That kind of extra layer of terror works so brilliantly with the Hollow Man concept. And I think Verhoeven, again, I see why he's disappointed that it does kind of have this studio plot where it feels very predictable and boring step to step in a way. But I think the extra layer of visual story and the kind of extra depths of the horror of this movie make it so much more than it could have been with a different director.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Again, like it's sad that Paul Verhoeven feels the way he feels about the movie, because I do think, again, while there are aspects of this that are, I guess, maybe not exactly his taste and a little more studio blockbustery, I do think that this is intrinsically a Paul Verhoeven movie. Like,
right.
There's footprints all over the place, and there's no way, like, he himself might wish he was the Invisible Man in this movie, but he is so front and center. It's pretty great.
Now, close us out. Why is this a prime Bacon movie?
Because Kevin Bacon is...
What does Kevin Bacon do in this movie that highlights his greatest strengths?
Kevin Bacon is... The thing I love about him in this movie is Kevin Bacon's ability to be this sort of charming, like, cavalier scientist, and then almost immediately make this turn into, like, horrible serial killer psychopath. Like, that is essentially what Kevin Bacon does so well in this movie. Is his turn is not like, it's not on a dime. It's actually very subtle, because he was this way the entire time. And I think Kevin Bacon portrays that so well. And I think he knew, reading the script, he's like, this guy's a piece of shit no matter what. So, like, he's not like, oh, a good man corrupted by power. He's like, no, this guy is like a power-hungry asshole who gets more power than he ever thought he would. Mm-hmm. That's the power of the Bacon, in my opinion.
Yeah. See, that's the beautiful part. Like you said, Kevin Bacon is great at the swaggery comic part, right?
Right.
He's really good at that role. The guy that you would see and be like, oh, I want to be friends with that guy. And that works really well in a role where, what if that's all just the surface stuff and below he wants to murder and rape? Right. You know, it makes it extra scary and believable because at the start of the movie, you're like, look at this cool motherfucker, Kevin Bacon. And pretty quick, you start being like, not as cool as I had hoped, right? He's not the ping pong ball Tetris scientist I had hoped for in this movie.
No, he's
actually a horrible, hollow criminal man.
He's driving Porsches and listening to, Stained or whatever he was listening to, and he's just listening to Korn and the entire Family Values, whatever that fucking tour was. Him and Limp Bizkit.
Seether with bronchitis, whatever the fuck it was. That's Kevin. As soon as you heard that, you're like, this is a really bad guy.
Yeah.
This guy's not okay.
As soon as you hear his musical choice and him singing along to it in the car in his Porsche, you're like, this might not go well.
Well, if you made this movie today, that car would just be littered with Rockstar cans and he would be jeweling like crazy. But in the 90s, we had to show that with new metal.
Yeah, exactly. In the 90s, it was about music, so like you could use we didn't have vapes yet.
I'll have to go back and look. I guarantee there was a Code Red somewhere on one of his desks for sure. All right, that's it, guys, for Hollow Man. We are so excited to be starting the year off shaking our bacon. I hope you guys are happy too. If you listen to this and you can get a hold of us on any of our social medias, we're pretty active on Twitter at FilmAlchemist1. Email filmalchemistpod@gmail.com, all that stuff. Wherever we are, if you guys get a hold of us and can make a case why we missed a great prime Kevin Bacon movie, perhaps I can find a way to fit some more in because I just adore this guy. He's one of those actors that you're just, why is this guy in so many movies I love?
Right.
And that's what we're here to explore, the amazing depths of his talent.
There's a reason there's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
That's right. And so I'm super excited for this month. Again, stay tuned. Next week, we're doing Tremors, which I think is just one of the most underappreciated gems of all time, even though we all love it. So that's it,
if
guys.
you don't know, all 6 are currently on Netflix, so you can watch it
even
before you
A Cold
listen to the
Day in
show.
Hell. Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell. Underrated classic jewel. It's actually something me and my 5-year-old son like to watch a lot is Tremors. It's weird. But anywho, that's it for Shakin' Bacon. We'll be back next week with Tremors. Leave us a rating and review. Find us on YouTube at The Nerd Alchemist. That's plural with an S at the end. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Josh Griffey.
I'm Alex Dandino.